commissioners, and back to you, Chair Harrington.
Oops. Thank you very much, Clerk Moss. So we're back in work session this day, Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. We have a full complement of commissioners, 4 of us in the room and Commissioner Fry online. And so we have a couple of big topics to get to. This one we're trying to take care of before the lunch break is our first ever comprehensive facilities capital improvement plan. And I'm really excited that we're going over this today. So welcome to our staff. Please introduce yourself and take it away.
Thank you very much. My name is Laurel Brown. I'm the Director of Facilities, Fleet and Park Services. I'm joined here today by Erin Calvert, my Assistant County Administrator. Today we have a slightly updated information pack on the screen to provide more clarity. There were no content changes, just little notes to make it easier for people to follow along. Our agenda today will be to review some facilities context for capital improvement planning and what that means to asset managers. We will also review some process improvements that we've made to the capital improvement plan over this last year. And we will present the draft FY 24-29 facility CIP. There will be pauses throughout for board questions and feedback because it is a lot of dense materials. And at the very end, we'll review the next steps for capital improvement planning this year.
Laurel, given the extent of the information today, I just need to confirm something for myself.
Please.
Today is our preview of all of this, and the full CIP for this time frame, 24 to 29, will be coming back to us again on March 12th, right?
That is correct. That is correct.
Good. So if I don't happen to capture or internalize everything today, I'll have another chance to get it right.
Absolutely. Yes.
It looks like you're segmenting your capital program. This one is titled facilities, fleet, parks. I mean, you got other things like roads. You got
No, the name of the department is facilities, fleet.
right. But are you going to do all of them at once?
No, today I'm only doing facilities. I'm just here to talk about the facilities related projects. On March 12th, Greg Munn will be back and he will present the entire county-wide capital improvement plan. And that will include input from LUT and ITS as well as facilities.
Maybe you're going to segment it and go ahead. So you did a deep dive. Good for you. All right.
Thank you.
Let me just add on to that. Since this is our second annual capital improvement plan that your board will be considering this upcoming fiscal year, we are in essence taking deep dives, as Laurel said, into facilities, fleet, parks, into IT and transportation, and they converge into one CIP that your board will be adopting. Part of this reason of the deep dive, and I know Laurel will be speaking to some of this, is we also need to really look at some of our needs. So for facilities, for example, we're currently undergoing the facility condition index. So much of this information will inform our second year CIP that we will continue to iterate on and get better each year as we get more information.
Great. Well, we look forward to the full presentation today. Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's see. Here we go. This is a slide that the board has seen a few times already, outlining our management framework for Washington County. The blocks that are outlined in red are specific to our capital improvement process. It is really an opportunity to recenter ourselves on the purpose of this exercise, which is to create capital improvement plans, which will inform a capital budget that allows us to manage assets for their whole life, not just acquisition and growth. And those capital improvement plans will be regularly influenced by the strategic planning that the county is doing.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Please.
It talks about light blue boxes indicate a management structure / system that needs to be developed or reviewed. So what does dark blue signify?
Well, it signifies that land use and transportation was ahead of the game and had already done those activities.
Yeah, so I realized that I'm not sure if you've done a popular PAFR yet or a PAFR. So I was about to say that dark blue is done, but then I realized, oops, that part's not done yet. So I couldn't just come up with a dark blue definition all on my own.
We can add the light blue, dark blue clarification on this. You are right. We haven't moved forward with the PAFR yet.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is our practice makes perfect slide. You will recall that the CIP is an iterative process. And although you'll see most changes here in the next 3 to 5 years as we build out a program from scratch, there will always be incremental improvements to come as time goes by and we actually utilize the tool together. This is our last look back slide. It's more of a linear view of our capital planning process. It captures where we started in January 2023. All 3 departments have made great strides over the past year. And speaking for facilities only, we are, as always, trying to catch up with LUT.
Hear that, LUT? You're leading the pack.
Oh, it's here. So we have completed much of the box of the tasks that are included in the initial planning box there. And today we find ourselves in February 2024, ready to present our draft 24-29 CIP. So before we do that, a little bit of context from a facilities point of view. When facilities managers talk about capital improvement planning, what they're primarily trying to do is communicate the total cost of ownership. We get really excited when we get to open a brand new building and are able to swing acquisitions, but there's a whole life cycle involved of these large assets, and we like to plan for them cradle to grave. So ongoing every day, facilities is responsible for the daily operations and maintenance activities. That's several types of maintenance that we do, preventive, planned, and reactive maintenance. And it's also just keeping the lights on, paying for utilities and other operational expenses. We do that out of our operations budget, and which is funded by through the cost allocation plan, which is a mechanism for spreading cost to all county programs. In the case of facilities, we do that on a square footage basis based on the percentage of space that they occupy within the entire county portfolio. The second type of expense that we are responsible for is the major maintenance. That maintenance is recurring and periodic, but not annual. Primarily, we take care of that out of the Building Equipment Replacement Fund, which we refer to as the BER Fund. That is populated also through the cost allocation plan with annual transfers that are equal to 2% of the depreciation cost as calculated by finance. From that fund, we are doing routine like-for-like replacements of major systems and equipment that are capitalizable. We cannot use that money unless the equipment or system is considered to be capitalizable.
Is that like the roof?
Oh, the roof.
Well, it says for like replacement of roof.
Oh, yeah, it does say that, right?
It does.
I'm sorry.
It's a matter of debate. Yes, the roof. It has to extend the useful life of a building, and so the roof,
Okay.
HVAC equipment, or the asset itself. So you're either replacing the entire asset, or you're preserving the
assets.
life of the
Life of-
asset. Correct.
Is that where we're really playing catch up with regard to those critical facilities that we're trying to get back on track? But once we get them there, then they'll be on that routine-like basis?
That is, well, routine. So once we do these projects, the critical facilities infrastructure projects, we will be starting with a brand new asset. And what will be our responsibility is to take care of those out of the operations budget.
Okay.
However, no matter how well you take care of an asset, eventually it will
Be re-
peter out on you. And so the other half of that responsibility is to start planning for its inevitable replacement.
Yep.
And that's what happens out of the BRR fund. So currently the 2% of annual depreciation is based on a 50-year life cycle, which means the expectation is that all of our assets are lasting 50 years, or at least on average that they're coming to 50 years. That's not quite enough.
Seems like that's a little too long.
Yes. Yes, I would.
Got
agree.
it.
I would agree with that.
But if we maintain our investment, 50 years isn't too long, is it?
It depends on the asset. We do have equipment in the courthouse complex, for example, that has been running for 75 plus years. That's a testament to the fact that we are doing daily operations and maintenance pretty well. And we do have skilled tradespeople on staff who are dedicated to extending the useful life of the equipment. And it's a little bit, they just don't make them like they used to. Today, if we put in a brand new boiler, it will peter out just like your iPhone, almost on schedule, no matter how well we take care of it. So it's yeah. So 50 years, usually we're talking 25-year on major equipment,
You know,
sometimes 10 to 15
yeah, I was
on
thinking
pieces of
talking
HVAC
much more
equipment.
bricks and mortar, but
Correct.
the equipment thing,
Correct.
I get that.
Bricks and mortar, different story.
Are we at least, Ms. Angie, are you and your staff at least empowered to practice today's standard versus yesterday's or prior generation standard? What I want to make sure is, as you've done the replacement now of critical systems, that if 25 years is the standard, that you're able to move forward with that in the construct, or at least come back to us and have us adopt that practicable construct.
We are laying out right now our current state.
Yep.
We will need to come back to your board to talk about what that future state is,
Okay.
so that it is fiscally manageable. And when I say manageable, manage the replacement life. So that will be the next step. This is just current state. And your questions are really good questions that you all have been asking.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
My understanding. What's your capitalization amount? Anything under 5?
Remember, he thinks like an accountant.
I know. And
Because he
that's
is-
usually
I
when
was
I
gonna say.
shout out for Mr. Munn.
You use 5,000, so anything up below that's going to be maintenance. That's pretty typical.
So with regard to the finance part of this, well, how about if we capture that for the March meeting
Okay, so
where Mr. Munn will be here?
what's the capitalization rate and what's, I'll look at him. And
Oh,
what-
he's-
and do you use component depreciation? Are you looking at, a building's not really just a building. I mean, the roof's the one thing, carpeting's a whole, so I don't know whether you're monetizing things. I mean, you're doing a good job of fixing this, but it's very complicated. But
It does get complicated.
You're asking for more granular information rather than.
I'm just
kind of a
curious.
Syllable.
I'm just curious what they do.
Yeah, we can provide that information as follow-up, or if I can call Greg Munn up to the table now to answer those questions.
Well, since we're only on slide 6 and you have a bunch of them, why don't, or a bunch of pages here, why don't we capture that and come back to it?
Thank you. Thanks. So we were talking about routine like-for-like replacements of existing equipment. And the other expense that falls under the category of major maintenance are departmental requests, which we collect annually through the capital call process. And those are generally intended to support employee satisfaction or meet programmatic growth. We manage those out of our facilities capital fund, and the revenue source for that activity is primarily the annual general fund transfer that we receive towards capital, but sometimes we will fund projects from grants or special funds as needed. The last category on this table are infrastructure investments. These are non-recurring events. They are one-time events. They involve, when we're lucky, the acquisition and new construction of a building to meet a need like the CAT project. They are usually funded from one-time sources like debt financing, bond, or grants. Once that building gets to about halfway through its life, we'll start wanting to do major remodels, expansions, retrofits to keep up with current life safety codes or changing county needs. An example of that on the pending list is the Walnut Street seismic upgrades. Those are often funded from our facilities capital fund, depending on size. But when they get very large, we'll start seeking other funding sources to do that. And the last thing is at the end of a useful life, we will decommission, demolish, or dispose of assets or buildings. So what you will not see on the table that we just reviewed is deferred maintenance. That's the one kind of maintenance that we're not doing. It's maintenance that has no funding source because we've chosen to defer it. People often think that that's a dirty word, but really it's just a strategic tool that asset managers use to balance the endless need with the limitless resources that we have. We should be making those decisions strategically, and they are based on available resources, be they labor hours or funding or ability to interrupt service delivery in a certain space. They will be based on the intended use of a building now and in the future. And they will also be influenced by known potential or planned large-scale projects out on the horizon. As long as we are actively managing the deferred maintenance, it's a reasonable practice. It is nearly unavoidable. The way that we actively manage that is by cataloging what we're not doing, monitoring existing conditions to make sure that things are not getting worse, and to plan for either large remodels that will scoop up a ton of deferred maintenance all at one time, or other ways that we will.
Questions before we answer. I'd like to know how big that bucket is. Because for maintenance, when you start talking about that, that's a huge bucket. And the CI, this capital improvement program could have nothing in it.
That's what this whole exercise is about, because it has not been cataloged, monitored, and planned for.
Nor acknowledged.
Correct.
That's why this board has embraced best known practices and is making up for lost time.
That is correct. And not,
So now is the time for questions. Here's a pause for questions, right? That was
oh, probably, yes.
slide.
Yes, you are correct.
So Commissioner
She
Rogers,
excitedly
you've
said.
got your questions right now.
Except for one more.
Okay,
Mm.
great.
Deferred maintenance is not in your plan, is not going to be programmed into your plan.
The deferred maintenance, where you will see that is in the capital improvement plan, there will be a list of unfunded projects greater than $250,000. So that is the bulk of what we are aware of right now.
This, but no potential funding possibilities for them.
That's correct. If there were potential funding,
Uh,
well, okay, so not all deferred maintenance is equal. There's some maintenance that we may choose never to fund it. It may be in a building that we know has a limited use to the county, and so we will not be asking for large dollars to replace the roof or the siding or whatever the existing needs are. There are some deferred maintenance that is critical and needs to be accelerated right away, and that will find its way onto the CIP, whether or not it has an identified funding source, because that's the tool that we now have to elevate those needs to the board, even when the project exceeds available annual funding.
Okay, other commissioners.
I have it's kind of a question. It's more of a sense of comfort. And, I look at this as providing me, frankly, with a level of comfort that we're not going to be where we were a year ago, and with surprises and with a level of understanding about what our exposure is over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. So I think your answer to Commissioner Rogers about the deferred comp making its way to the list, even without available funding, is really critical to me, because I think that's where we found ourselves in a little bit of a pickle this last year. So, but I have a little anxiety around the point that you made that there may be deferred maintenance that we're not aware of.
Yes.
And when you say that, I would ask you, is there any way I can't imagine that we wouldn't be aware of something that's in the millions in relationship to fixing. And I'm asking for a professional opinion here. We all have eyes. We can see, when a roof needs replacing. We know when our water heater needs replacing or our furnace at home. And I'm asking you if those things that you're not aware of in your mind would ever reach the level of the level that we've experienced this last year. And I recognize that's a really hard question.
It's a tricky question. What I can say is that we're doing everything possible to reduce that gap, that unknown, to reduce the unknown factor. The facilities condition assessment, which is winding up now, is an example of that. That's something that we'll do now, and we'll do again in 3 to 5 years, and again in 3 to 5 years, to help comb through buildings with fresh eyes and expertise that will help us find things ahead of time. That's one example. That said, there is no way to know all things unless you're doing intrusive investigations, like opening walls, looking into, getting in underneath and looking up. And these aren't really warranted unless you have some reason to expect there's a problem. I will say in facilities management, I'm more worried about water than I am about fire, because water can get in and cause damage over a long period of time that is just not visible. So there will, and those kind of repairs could be in the millions.
Mm-hmm.
The portfolio is a well-maintained portfolio.
See, but I think as long as it's kind of like the pavement condition index that the rural roads goes through, we start this process and we do it on a rotating basis. Those that unexposed risk that you're talking about there will become very, very minor, because again, we're going through this rotating basis every 5 years, giving it a new grade, and things will pop up. So it's just like, that's like your house, everything else, you think everything's great until it isn't. So
I lived in a home that had EFS, and so I'm fully aware of
Yes.
of the water intrusion and those types of things.
Yeah.
But I appreciate I guess what I really want to say is I appreciate this work. I recognize that you've been on quite a fast track here, and that the gap's going to narrow as we move along in terms of our risk. So thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Any other board questions at this point? Okay, let's keep going.
I have my
Go
hand
ahead.
raised. Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner Fry.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Laura, great presentation. I have a question about the slide before this. If you could go back, not this one, the one before that one. Yeah, this one. What you have listed under examples, is that all the challenges or sort of the deficiencies that exist in our county facilities that really require us to have a capital improvement? Or is there more?
There are more. Those are all real examples from our system, but there are more. In each one of those categories, there are additional examples of that expense category.
So will all the challenges be listed in the plan then, or?
The known projects and the, so the capital improvement plan itself includes a rather detailed spreadsheet, which we'll review shortly, and that will include all of the known challenges or projects that we have put on our 5-year horizon. And included in the larger packet that will be coming to you in mid-March, there will also be a list of unfunded projects, and that will be the second half of that, the ones that we are not planning to do at this time in the next 5 years. Some of those projects could end up on next year's capital plan, but right now in this capital plan, which is 24 through 29, those projects were not included, but you will have visibility into them because they'll be included in the capital improvement plan packet.
Thank you.
Sure, Willie, anything?
Nope.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, see where we are. Great questions, thank you. So I would like now to review a couple of process improvements that have been made over the past year, largely with the help of CIP and where we will be headed with that next. So in terms of building our project inventory, that is cataloging our deferred maintenance. In previous years, team was keeping those lists on, or keeping that information on multiple lists that were separated by funding source. So if we planned to fund it from Burr, it was on one list. If we planned to fund it from the general fund, it was on a separate list. If a department was going to take care of it out of their funds, it would be on a special fund list. And that made it really difficult to capture or plan for the full need. Now that we have a CIP, we are able to look at these things all at one time, regardless of funding source. And facilities is maintaining a comprehensive list of deferred maintenance, excuse me, and capital improvement, which we update quarterly in a very long in-person meeting.
Sounds ominous.
There is food usually. That's where we add new items that have come to light over the year. That's where we'll be putting our facilities assessment inventory will be added to that DMCI list, and we create or update rough order of magnitude estimates based on today's conditions. At that time, we will also remove any projects that have already been funded or have turned out to have become irrelevant because of changing circumstances. That is the list that I would go to answer Commissioner Rogers' question about what is our total deferred maintenance liability at any given point in time, but it's brand new. So right now, if I provided you that number, I would have a lot of caveats to include as we continue growing our process. Moving forward, in 2024, the quarterly meetings will include assigning and reviewing initial priorities, which will be conversations about how urgent this is. Is it urgent and important? We'll just be putting them in large buckets of priority. And we will also be inviting other departments to participate in that long meeting with us. Ideas that I have had so far are OEICE and the Office of Sustainability would have very valuable contributions to that and to that quarterly process. The next process improvement I'd like to talk about is how we're funding capital projects. In previous years, we were really limited to the annual budgeting cycle and the available funds in that process. So we've kind of discussed a little bit the Building Equipment Replacement Fund. It's important to understand that although we're receiving $4 million of funding each year based on depreciation, it's restricted funding, which can only be used on a subset of our assets. In addition to that, we have generally received an annual general fund transfer. However, it has not been predictable and is generally decreasing over the years. As an example, or just to draw that picture, since FY 1920, it has ranged from $5 million to 0, which does make it hard to plan. So where we are today, using the current CIP, we are able to provide a 5-year lookout. We are extending our options beyond the 1 year's worth of funding by allowing time to build alternate funding strategies. We now have a tool for presenting the projects that need to be done, but exceed the available funds that we already get. The general fund transfer this year was $1.92 million, and the BRR is still $4 million. Going forward in 2024, facilities will be partnering with finance to create a capital reserve mechanism that will allow us to hold funds in preparation for these larger projects out on the horizon. We will also hope to identify a dedicated and predictable funding source for capital improvements. And we are hoping to separate department requests from large capital projects so that we can better align cost and funding source.
We need to pause here for a second. Commissioner Willie?
Just going back to the general fund transfer that you plugged into the current CIP at 1.92 million is pretty specific. I mean, it's not like before it was 0 to 5, now we're 1.92. So do you have something that goes behind that 1.92?
Yes, so it was 2 million. It was supposed to be 2 million the year prior, but we paused that transfer when we discovered the $30 million blah, blah, that budget pivot moment. And we took cuts in that last budget cycle. I think it was yeah. So we were balancing our cuts to 4% and we had to cut from that. So that's why you have a very specific, but I'm not leaving the 0.02 million. So I'm just making sure that it's there.
Okay.
So I have a question
Yes.
with regard to future and how far future goes. And let me tell you why, give you the background as to why. This board has been and continues to do a significant amount of foundation building. And this comprehensive CIP is one of those things. But I know that 3 of us learned an awful lot coming in to the board in 2019. And I know that I anticipate we'll have at least 4 of us through the end of 2026, going for the presumptive close there, Commissioner Fry.
She's waving.
So I'm trying to figure out how far we can push the edge of the envelope in terms of our strategic planning, right? I'm really motivated for us to get as clear a picture as we can, not only on the what, but the how through that time frame. And so I don't know when you use this phrase future, if you're talking next year or 10 years from now. And that was a little snide. I apologize. I want to hurry up.
Yes, yeah.
And I know none of us can make up for lost time, right? I get that. But how far can we go?
I think that with your board support, we can get pretty far. I have had conversations with finance, and all 3 of these are very standard operating procedures. So there's not anything earth-shattering or groundbreaking. We just need to work out the mechanics and make the proposals.
So it is within our grasp to do.
Yes.
Terrific. Music to my ears. Thank you so much.
And Chair, we will capture that as a follow-up presentation. So when we come back with CIP, we will talk to that
Okay.
timeline.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Any other board questions on this slide? All righty. Now we get into real details.
We're getting there. We still have 2 more improvements to go through. So this is more of a formatting improvement where we have consolidated many project components into larger projects because functionally that's how they're being delivered to us. So an example, just so that you know what to expect, the difference between last year's plan and this year's plan. On last year's plan in the yellow square, we had all the different components that were going into the LEC, HVAC, and infrastructure upgrade. And this year we've collapsed those to provide visual clarity into a single project. The result of that is that you will see some early retirement of project numbers, but you'll still find that level of detail in the project narrative that will be a part of this year's project plan or capital improvement plan. So the last process improvement before we get to dive into this year's plan is that we have refined the criteria for inclusion in the CIP. Last year, when we were preparing our very first capital improvement plan, we were really focused on financial impacts, and we endeavored to include all projects over $250,000. What we found was this created a lot of noise in the data and kind of cast a net that was a little beyond strategic decisions. And so this year we have created a criteria that slims that down to focus on strategy. So we tried to answer the question, will this project change the footprint or function of existing space or service delivery? And in the column on the left, that's kind of fleshed out by talking about how, yes, we will continue to include projects that were estimated to cost greater than $250,000. We will always include projects that exceed available annual funding, regardless of cost. We will include projects that require design or redesign. So they're not like for like replacements of existing. There's something kind of new about it. And anything that has the potential of changing the footprint of the county portfolio or impacting service delivery will be included in the CIP, as well as studies and assessments that prepare us for those larger projects, because they're often the first glimmer that something is in the works that we should be talking about. What is not going to be included, generally speaking, are estimates or projects that are estimated to cost less than $250,000, anything that is a routine repair or replacement of existing systems or equipment, or regular routine refresh of building finishes. Those things may cost greater than $250,000, but they will not be included on the CIP because they're just standard, regular, expected maintenance. Where you will see those kinds of activities will be in the budget submittals, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. So what that would look like, what that criteria applied to the facilities context will look like is excluding the routine maintenance that we do that is above this blue line on the table that we reviewed earlier, and including the more strategic changes that we are proposing below the blue line on this table. So the things that are showing up, yeah. So if we apply the criteria that we just reviewed, which is intended to focus your attention on the strategic change-making decisions, we would be excluding the routine kind of maintenance that is expected of a facilities department and built into existing funding sources like the Building Equipment Replacement Fund and the operations budget. Everything below the blue line would be included in the CIP because it has because it will impact the footprint of the county. So we'll either be expanding or shrinking, or changing the function of space, or we will be impacting service delivery. Okay. So the projects that are happening as part of our operations budget, those are just baked in. There isn't very much visibility into the specific project that we may do. Those are generally low cost projects. The major maintenance that is referenced in the next section, that is included in the budget submittals specific to each funding source. So there is a list that details what we plan to do out of the Building Equipment Replacement Fund and what we plan to do out of the Facilities Capital Fund. And if we're using other capital funds out there, it is detailed in the budget submittals.
So this is where on this slide, I appreciate the the table presentation, but for our sake in looking back at this, as well as for our community members, I think this, I'll articulate the two questions that I had in a minute, but I think there's some additional text needed.
Oh, okay.
You've just, for example, you verbalized that we'll continue to see through the budget process, not through the CIP, but rather through budget submittals, each associated with the use of a revenue source. Because in seeing just this table on this slide, it caused me to have two questions. What visualization, or what visibility rather, not visual, what visibility, can even read my
Mhm.
scratch, does the board have through portions above the line in the excluded? And then the second question is, what CAO management processes will be used and that we can functionally rely upon to make sure that that good maintenance that needs to happen continues to happen. So this is where you've done a good job of making me understand what's not going to be in the CIP, but it left me with the question, but where did the rest of it go? And so I think we just need to be clear about that, document it, what have you, so that March 12th and through the whole budget process, we know what to count on. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and I really appreciate that observation. It can feel very clear when you're putting it down on paper, but I appreciate you letting me know how it is received. That's great.
Yeah, I know this is an extensive journey that we're on, and that I'm fully confident you're getting us into the place we need to be. I'm just not, I just wasn't following all the pieces and how they all fit together. Thank you. Are all the other board members right where? Great. Thank you.
Okay, so this was a pause for questions, but I hear none, so we'll keep going. Now we get to
I
talk.
like that comment though that you put in there, maintenance, not expense, investments. So
Wow.
it sounds to me like a good capital projects person.
Yeah, thank you. It was sort of subliminal, and then you called it out like that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
slid that one in there, huh?
And a reminder for
It was
all of us.
well played.
Yeah.
Yes.
Saying.
Water heater.
So this is the summary view of our draft facilities 24-29 CIP. Yes.
Commissioner Fye has her hand raised.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
excuse me.
Go ahead.
Monitoring.
Great, Chair Harrington, I'm gonna be off camera for a quick 10 minutes. I'll be right back. But
Okay.
I'm here. I'm listening and participating, but
Okay.
off camera.
So this is the summary view of our 24-29 CIP. It is a spreadsheet that tells a very good story if you know how to read it. So it is divided into two sections. The top half is describing the expenditures that we have made or anticipate making over the next 5 years. And the bottom half is focused on revenue that has been committed or that we are asking for in future years. The columns out to the right are marching through time, left to right. And if we start with that very first column, actuals through FY 22-23, that is capturing dollars that have already been expended on projects that are in the current CIP. So you'll see that we've already spent or invested $12.8 million into projects that are on the current plan. And if you slide down, you'll see that in the past, through June 30th of 2023, we have committed $14.9 million worth of revenue towards those projects. The next column over is capturing this fiscal year, 23-24, and you'll see that we are targeting a spend of $14.7 million this fiscal year on capital projects. We wish it was twice that much, but our capital projects team has been operating at a 50% vacancy rate for about a year's time. If you look to the next year, 24-25, we'll be making up for lost time because we are fully staffed, and the critical facilities infrastructure projects and the CAT project will both be picking up steam, and we will be accelerating our spend rate. So if you slide back down to revenue, you'll see in 23-24 that we were provided $69 million worth of revenue to take care of county need. That is a very large influx of revenue that is largely driven by the award of ARPA dollars with this board support and the excellent work that HHS has done fundraising for their CAT project. It is not the expectation that we would spend those dollars in that same year. That's just documenting that we have received those dollars for use throughout the life of a project. So if we go back to the total expenditure line, you'll see that our peak year in this plan is next year at $94.9 million, and that in the following year, we're only at 31 million, and then we kind of taper down to 30, and then 13, and then out in year 5, we have a $2 million projected spend. That's not accurate. That column is just vacant because we don't have all the information that we need to populate it with reasonable estimates or planned projects at this point in time. An example of something that I know is coming but is not included on this plan would be the possibility of a jail expansion. If the jail capacity study and the follow-on design proceed as we expect them to, it's very possible that we'll see very large numbers in 27, 28, and 28, 29 when we come back to you next year with the same plan. So that is the summary view.
I'll just
Oh.
share for the board's benefit that I sent Ms. Angie and her team an email about how some of the summary descriptions could use a little bit of improvement.
You did, and I incorporated that feedback, although I couldn't come up with anything better than projects. That is a sort of catch-all phrase that we're using currently to capture projects that are kind of miscellaneous projects.
Sorry, I haven't caught up since the 5G version.
Oh, no, I appreciate you calling it out. So this
Mr. Mon and I, but TBT, is that to be determined? Is that what that line is?
It is, and you do me a great favor because I meant to highlight that line as the most important piece of this entire capital improvement project. That TBD in the revenue column, it's about the 5th from the bottom. That's the funding we need. That's our needed funding. So until now, we did not have the opportunity to present projects that were not fully funded. And this is where we're capturing them. So you can see that over the next 5 years, we have about $63 million worth of need that hasn't been identified. As we go through the detailed version, detailed views in the next 3 slides, you'll see exactly which projects those relate to. In the 24-25 column, in the most immediate sense, we have almost $6 million worth of need for 24-25. About $3 million of that is related to CAT funding, and there is a solid plan for filling that gap. I have no concerns about that. The rest of that unidentified funding need is related to the addition of a new courtroom in LEC that we're trying to fast track very quickly, and the some additional design work associated with the jail capacity study. And I believe that there's also dollars in that amount in 24-25 for the courthouse capacity study to kick off.
Brief comments again. But I'm used to revenue on top and the expenditure below, but that's okay. And then having a carryover, because you're not showing carryover. For instance, you're 23, 4, you're taking in $60 million, or 68 million, spending 14, that means there's a $54 million carryover. You're not spending it all, but it's not showing going from year to year. And your line down below the grand total, that's just a difference between the expenditures and the revenues. It'd be interesting to know what you're gonna, I mean, it'd be interesting to know those differences, the cumulative as they spread across. Because I don't think the deficits are quite what my math in my head without getting calculator out are quite what you're saying they are. But I personally, this is Roy, I don't like to do the TBD. I never looked at that. I don't like that at all.
Oh.
Because it's, I mean, it'd be much better to say, here's what we need for funding versus acting like that's some amount of revenue we have, but just preference, I'm just saying.
PBD is a bad label.
It is a bad label. Okay, duly noted. And I
Our
think
board.
that as
Needs to be secured is
need-
much better.
Oh, needs to be secure. Okay, yes.
Yeah,
I
our
think-
funding gap or
Yeah,
PBD is too flippant.
yeah, oh, okay.
And if we could the rollover from year to year, it'd be nice to know because you do have, that's roughly 54 million. We'll go into 24, 25, where you say you have this big deficit. It's not as bad as you think. Because you had 54 million coming over.
That's right.
So
That's exactly right.
it's just a little better picture.
So you'd
I
like to
agree.
see a running total down at the bottom, so instead of, it's the 54 million in brackets is actually 56 million, because you got 2 million carryover from the year before.
Yeah, but not all those dollars are commingled. Can you commingle?
Yeah, okay, I get it,
Right?
all right.
When we get to the detailed project view, it's a little more clear, but I agree that a running total would be a nice add to this.
Where we budget under Oregon budget law stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that idea. Where at a glance, the way it's currently structured, the place that it will balance is in that bottom cell all the way to the right. If we have not lined up the revenue with the expenses, there will be some kind of balance there.
Okay, folks, we're on page 15. There's 23 total and we've got
Okay.
about 20 minutes.
It's just exciting stuff. Okay, so here we are, the detailed view of the facilities 24-29 plan. I will not go into detail on each project, but I will just kind of explain again how to read it. It's very similar to the summary page that we just viewed. You'll see on the left-hand side, the project number. That's a unique identifier that will never be reissued to another project. So if we remove a project, that number gets retired along with it. We are showing the expenditures and the revenues. The expenditures, this is where you get those categories that show up in the summary page, and the revenues, same. These are the revenues that show up in the summary page. The animal shelter is the top one, so we'll just talk about that. It is showing up in actuals through 23 because those dollars were expended in fiscal year 23. It is not showing up in the next year because that project is complete. Next year, that project will not exist on the capital improvement plan any longer because it will be completely finalized. For larger projects like the Center for Addiction Triage and Treatment, halfway through the page, you'll see that we are, again, bringing in revenue at a different rate than we are expending it, but by the time you get to the end of the project, it balances. So this is the second page of detail. The most significant projects on here are the LEC HVAC and infrastructure replacement projects and the Walnut Street Center seismic retrofit and HVAC upgrade. Those are both comprised of many components that you'll find details on in the project narrative. For the Walnut Street Center seismic, we put $1.4 million in this fiscal year in order to continue the design work necessary to capitalize on available grants and to prepare for eventual execution of that important upgrade. And then,
So
yes.
I will note that that expenditure doesn't, expenditure doesn't sound complete enough. What you just articulated is that the planning is happening. But the CIP, even the detail view, doesn't communicate that same fact.
That the planning is happening.
What I just heard you describe
Correct.
is you put $1.4 million towards the study and that's happening. I mean, that's what I thought I just heard, quote unquote.
The study is happening, correct? I
That's what
should
I'm
be
trying to
more
highlight.
clear, correct. So back in the day, and I don't have at my fingertips the exact date, we were provided $2.9 million of gain share money that you see there in the actuals column. And that was to prepare us for this project. And so we have done that in fits and spurts over the years while we work to piece together funding for a large project out of our annual general fund transfer. Now that we have the capital plan, we're elevating that for a full 5-year plan. And I will clarify that the planning is underway and has been underway.
So what I'm highlighting is if you want to use the CIP as a way to communicate to the board what has happened, is happening, and will be happening, we have to have some better terminology.
I agree. I agree. And
That's one example.
I appreciate that feedback. That's part of how we build this plan together.
Yep. Yep.
So the final page of the facilities plan, it's just includes the courthouse complex. The notable thing on this page is that we have included a number of studies to evaluate needs of departments that may lead to future projects. So that would include looking into the Secure Record Center for County Archives to evaluate what it would take to provide them with something that meets current standards for record retention. Similarly, we are looking into the needs of medical examiner facilities, given recent changes in the services that the state provides counties on that front.
And I just realized one of my own mistakes from reading this on Friday. I confused public services building and public safety building on a routine basis.
But you're consistent, so that's important.
Consistently wrong. Yeah, but I was riding up the elevator today with a fellow employee and we were talking about, only one of the 3 elevators works. And I was like, yeah, and it's not going to be replaced till for another 3 years. Well, I was wrong because I made the consistent mistake. So that's good news that I was wrong.
Yeah.
Yay.
And those are 3 very serviceable elevators, which will be super reliable shortly as soon as we complete that project.
Thank you.
So that is the end of the facilities portion. We now have a summary view of parks. It works exactly the same way, and the detail is available in your packet, or I'm willing to answer questions now.
Well, the learning for me is that I wasn't familiar with the special fund known as the Parks Opportunity Fund.
Yes. Would you like that information now?
Sure.
That is a fund that has been in place for quite some time. It is populated with timber sales that come from the forest properties owned by the county and managed by our real estate and planning program. The funds are intended to be used to manage the timber properties. We have a consultant that we keep on retainer, I guess, that we have on contract to review and make recommendations about how we utilize that resource. And the second primary purpose is to fund improvements to our parks, Washington County parks.
Where are these timber properties? It's not our CFTLC properties, state forest.
There may be overlap. I'm not familiar with that.
No,
Yeah, I'll have to find out, but the properties are scattered around. I've viewed many of them and they're often
in
things that,
Washington
Yeah.
County.
yeah.
Yeah, Washington County owns forest land.
Oh,
Yeah. Learn something new every day.
Any other questions? last time.
You know that stuff like the back of your
Well,
hand, right?
I
Jerry?
didn't know. Been focused on trust land,
Yeah, me too.
So you've got the Bureau of Reclamation grant in there in 23-24 at 4.2. But I don't see the project.
Oh, that's because they're on, well, where they are included on this summary view is in the Parks 2024 capital projects.
Next slide.
On the next slide, you'll see
Oh, okay. So I got
the
ahead there. Sorry.
details, right? So that first line item was an attempt to communicate that we are doing planning and design now. And then further down, you'll see that on the last page of this slide, the first project is the Scoggins Valley Park campground, which in the published version, we did annotate that to clarify that SVP stands for Scoggins Valley Park. And then the rest of those projects show up here on the last page. The Scoggins Valley Park Visitor Center and office on the top of this list. And I must have passed. The Tualatin River Access Facility on the first page of detail is the other project that uses those BOR grant dollars. Actually, it doesn't. It uses only Metro local share.
Metro shared.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So,
Whoop, wait,
yeah, that was questions.
at this juncture,
Oh.
board members, questions?
I've asked a lot, but I'll make an observation.
Please.
A couple of them, if you take them for what they are, I appreciate how hard you're picking this, how difficult it is. We've talked about maybe the scheduling of the expenditures, revenues, maybe tweaking that a bit. But in any inventory, or anything that we do in the financial world, we set it, you know, what we're gonna predict, you know, and kind of done that at the beginning. We picked that a little bit, but not a bunch, because yeah, your assumptions are that you're going to exclude certain assets. I heard that. I asked about the capitalization. I'll get that from Greg. I don't know your componentization issues. And Commissioner Reese was picking up on a comment that I was making, but what exactly is the deferred? This county is in serious shape of having not enough revenues to do what it needs to do on a daily basis, alone capital. And without having any understanding of what all this means quantitatively, it's impossible to make decisions of what got excluded and what got it. So I'm not picking on you. I think you're doing a good job, but at the end of this process in March, I don't care. You let people make their decisions, they will, but I'm going to be of conclusion. I don't think we have enough useful information to make meaningful decisions on what really needs to be funded in terms of the capital improvement program. And I don't care if it's a horrible story, it's a transparent story. And I'm not sure, in my opinion, just looking at it from my myopic accounting brain, that you know that at all. So take what you want out of that, but that's my observation.
Thank you. And I agree that we're in the beginning of this process and that the goal is exactly as you described, that level of transparency that will allow us to make difficult decisions because we won't have enough resources.
Well, I find your comment a little shocking, Commissioner Rogers, because I think you're really fortunate that in your 40th year, we're finally building a capital improvement plan that is taking the full inventory of all master plans to date, all of our known needs to date, and cataloging them and projecting out, given our current 5-year view of revenue sources, where we stand. It is not the full management story for where do we go from here and how do we solve the full portfolio, but is leaps and bounds better than the disconnected lists that we have and that were not captured in our budget previously.
coming back, I don't disagree with anything you just said.
Excellent.
I'm saying that if we want to be better than where we were, we had a pay-as-you-go system, and now we're looking at a forward-looking. So I'm not disagreeing with any of that. So I'm not,
No, I don't agree that we had a pay-as-you-go system
you know,
because there was a large sense of denial. There was no plan to take care of the repair and replacement, and that's why we had the critical facilities threat that we did of closing our jail, our community correction center, our juvenile building, and our public services building across the street. Because, to use a euphemism, no clue, no plan. While those buildings were very well maintained, we did not have an inventory of the nature of things. So this is a big improvement in having that inventory, and has been said over and over and over again. This will be an iterative process to get plans in place to ensure that all of the assets have the opportunity of not only the nearer term, but the long-term level of renewal and replacement and extension. So hopefully we will no longer be building new buildings while ignoring the current asset need. Without eyes wide open in terms of what we're choosing to do. So I think you can be very proud of the level of data that our staff is endeavoring to put for us and adopt as part of this upcoming year's budget plan.
only comment back, I'm still not taking exception. It's the idea in prior years is to operate much like a lot of school districts and others. If you need something, you go out for a bond issue. And I've heard Commissioner Willie say that. At what point do you have a bond issue for some of this stuff? What you're doing is showing us the liabilities, and that's what I'm not criticizing. I'm not making, any disagreements with what you're saying. I don't know what that liability is. And this county needs to make a decision at some point. Are you going to fund it on a annual basis and try to accumulate, or you go out for some kind of bond issue to actually get? And so I'll stop there. But that's that.
Okay.
Well, from my standpoint, this is really good.
It is.
It's much more expanded than I thought it was going to be. So yeah, if this is a snapshot of looking ahead in the future, then you've done a great job on this. And yes, like you said, it's iterative. There's going to be more to it, but I think you've done a great job giving us this first step and first glimpse into this.
Well, I want to come back to what I just heard through my left ear from Commissioner Rogers. He also said, yes, this is very good.
It is great.
So that was a huge dose of cold water you threw out there. So, it was pretty darned icy. So that's why I wanted to come back with your saying this is very good. Because it is. Commissioner Kreese, go ahead.
And all that said, for me individually, what this does, it builds my trust. And I think that's and one of the things that Chair talked about when she said, how long is the future? And I think all of us want to be able to leave behind us, and we're included, a pathway forward that there aren't the surprises and the gaps that we've recently experienced. And for me, that's what this is really all about, is leveling what our expectations are and what the future will hold in terms of our capital needs. So for me, this is about trust in looking at the future. I can take aberrations. That's not a problem. Life is full of aberrations, but cliffs I'm not so happy about. So, and from my perspective, this is reducing the greatly reducing the chances for cliff.
Can't say that on there, but
Oh, yeah, exactly. Oh, darn moments.
oh yeah, moment.
Well, Commissioner Fire, are you there? Is there
Yes.
anything, any feedback you'd like to contribute at this juncture before we go to the next step slide?
No, it's a good start. Good job, team.
Yes, and I will close with that. This is very well done, very well done, which is why we can go into the next step slide.
Thank you. So next steps will be to incorporate today's feedback into the capital improvement planning process. Greg Munn and team will be back on March 12th to present the full 24-29 CIP for review at work session, and that will include all 3 departments that participate. And it will also be a first glance at the project descriptions that are included this year. And on April 23, we'll be seeking board approval for the final countywide CIP.
So a tip for the full team, just as Laurel has received from different board members leading up to today, as well as from today's meeting, we do need to make sure that the descriptions and light items satisfy what the board level of understanding means. So March 12th, you'll learn more. That's a good thing, right? Because where we're trying to get to is that April 23rd, the board will be able to adopt that final CIP for those next 5 years with a tremendous amount of it'll have tremendous amount of meaning, confidence, and clarity in terms of where we're at and where we continue to iterate and build upon a strong foundation. So, good job, team.
Thank you.
Yes, we appreciate how arduous this has been to gather up this state of affairs. Really, this is exciting.
It's very satisfying.
Yes, thank you very much, Laurel.
You've never had one of those accolades like that for your presentation. Yeah, finance.
The bar, yeah, the bar is set pretty high. That's right. Great, great. Well, we have another big topic that will come to us after lunch, the strategic plan update, and then we'll have board and leadership communication. And hopefully we'll end a little early this afternoon. Fingers crossed. So have a good lunch, everybody. We'll see you back here at 1. Thank you.